Could watching YouTube videos about guns, the Second Amendment, and self-defense ultimately lead to murder? That was the theory in the courtroom this week. I'm KOMO News crime and justice reporter Jeremy Harris. I'm going to walk you through a 2024 murder case that just came to sentencing here in Washington, and with a very unique theory from defense attorneys that I had not heard before in all my years of covering cases like this. And then we'll let you hear from the judge himself as to why he did not buy this shooter's story. This all starts back in January of 2024 in Edmonds. That's a very small community up north suburbs outside of Seattle. It was in the middle of the night when a man named Alex Waggoner, who was 21 at the time, he was walking to the liquor store. Now, prosecutors said he'd already been drinking and was going to get more alcohol, and he had his gun on him. As he was crossing the intersection at 236th Street and Edmonds Way, a rideshare driver named Abdikadir Gedi Shariif, he was making a turn and was distracted by his phone. Now, we know exactly what happened here because the prosecutors actually recovered dash camera video from both in front of the car and inside the car from this rideshare driver. That video, according to prosecutors, shows him looking at his phone, making the turn. He was distracted, but he stopped in time and did not hit Waggoner, who was in the crosswalk. Abdikadir Gedi Shariif, the rideshare driver, rolls down his window and begins to apologize when Waggoner, who was walking in that crosswalk, pulls out a gun and shoots him 11 times. Abdikadir Gedi Shariif died there at the scene, but Waggoner, he took off. According to prosecutors, there's Ring doorbell video of him screaming and banging on the door for his girlfriend to let him back in the apartment after the shooting. When Edmonds police got there, they didn't know who had shot and killed this rideshare driver, just that he was killed in the middle of the intersection in the middle of the night while working his shift doing rideshare. This case got a lot of attention, as you can imagine, and eventually police were able to narrow in on Alex Waggoner as a suspect. Ultimately, he was charged with murder for this shooting, which prosecutors said was completely unjustified. Even if he thought that he had almost been hit by the car, or in the defendant's own words, he had to sidestep from outside that vehicle, prosecutors said nothing about that case justified shooting and killing the driver as he was in the act of apologizing for getting too close to this guy in a crosswalk. Case goes to sentencing, and I want to take you inside the courtroom now. This is the defendant, Alex Waggoner. He comes into the courtroom, he sits down, and he knows he's looking at a lengthy prison sentence for this case, potentially up to 20 years. His defense attorneys, though, they presented an interesting theory, and before any case goes to sentencing, the defense attorneys have a chance to write what's called a sentencing memorandum, and that's what I have here in my hands. Basically, it's their opportunity to tell the judge why they think their client should get a lower sentence. I always read these before we go into sentencing hearings, and this one really stood out to me, and I want to explain to you why. There's some stuff in here where the defense talks about Alex Waggoner had a rough childhood, had a rough teenage years, but then the defense says that he ultimately started becoming interested in and watching YouTube videos about self-defense, the Second Amendment, and guns. And I'm going to read a part here. This is from the defense attorney. Until Alex became mesmerized by the videos on YouTube, i.e. Second Amendment and gun culture, he had no apparent predisposition to carry a firearm in public with the belief that it was needed in order to protect himself from the dangerous world. In a way, Alex's beliefs and subsequent actions of carrying a firearm for self-protection was induced by others, e.g. social media, YouTube, etc. And then he references a psychologist's report, but that it says, these beliefs and culture that were so clearly perpetuated by the countless YouTube videos put Alex on the path that would put him in the exact scenario that the online videos preach people need firearms to protect from. One would say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Here's a little bit of what the defense attorney said in court.
When you're told that the world's dangerous, people are out to get you, and you're put in a situation where you believe somebody was trying to run you over, your immediate reaction is, I'm being attacked.
The defense also put some of the blame here on the rideshare driver, saying, quote, if Mr. Shariif had not been distracted by his phone on January 3rd, 2024, he would have easily been able to see Alex legally walking in the crosswalk crossing Edmonds Way. If Mr. Shariif was not distracted, he would have simply waited for Alex to cross the street prior to making the left-hand turn onto South Edmonds Way. In a small but very significant degree, Mr. Shariif was the initiator of the incident because Mr. Shariif's near collision with Alex in the crosswalk set the events of the night in motion. Now, the defense goes on to essentially say They would like a 10-year sentence in prison for Alex Waggoner. And their argument here, first of all, there's a deadly weapon enhancement which carries a 5-year mandatory minimum in Washington, and then they asked for 5 years for the murder. Prosecutors wanted much more than that, and ultimately you'll see exactly what the judge ruled on this. But prosecutors pushed back really hard on this idea that YouTube videos had somehow radicalized Alex Waggoner to the point where he was so scared he was walking around with a gun and ultimately shot this rideshare driver. Here's from the prosecutors. Secondly, this was not about a young man who'd become radicalized by watching YouTube videos. One only need look at the words of Mr. Waggoner, who in the hours following his arrest lay the blame solely upon himself and his overreaction to a harmless situation, as well as his own intoxication for what occurred. This is prosecutors. Though he evinced a fondness for such videos, these comments were made in passing at the beginning of the interview with the defendant, who admitted during testimony that he knew why he'd been arrested and continued his attempts to deceive the detectives, explaining his keenness for firearms, not an obsession. So this case, of course, went to trial. A jury did not believe Alex Waggoner's story. They found him guilty of second-degree murder. So then at sentencing, Alex was given an opportunity to speak to the court. Here is what he said in its entirety.
I would just like to say that I do understand the seriousness of this whole situation. And to everybody that's been affected by my decisions, I would like to say that I'm sorry.
Ultimately, it's up to the judge to decide how long that person is going to go to prison for, whether or not to buy the defense recommendation or whether to go with what prosecutors were asking for. And as we were sitting there waiting for this to happen, it was very clear when Judge Okrent started speaking in the sentencing hearing, he was not happy with the defendant and he was going to impose a sentence much higher than what the defense was asking for. I'm going to play out Judge Okrent's full remarks here. I think this is important because judges, when they're imposing a sentence, they're also sending a message about this case, the actions here, and why they're imposing the sentence that they are. Let's listen to Judge Okrent.
Mr. Abdikadir Shariif was a brother, cousin, son, friend, a community leader, and a man who was just doing what we all want people to do, chasing the American dream, trying to make things better for his family. He's described as a person who would give you his shirt off his back. I can't bring him back. I can only say, may his memory be a blessing. That night, Mr. Waggoner, you had been drinking. You decided that you were going to get some more alcohol, and you took your gun with you. And you're an adult. You're not a child. You testified in court. You understand the significance of what you did. You understood exactly what you were doing that night. And you decided to take your gun with you after drinking to get some more alcohol. Contrary to what your attorney said on page 5 and 7 of their memorandum, this was not Mr. Shariif's fault. This idea of saying, well, it's just an incident that he crossed Mr. Waggoner's path, and then saying to me in the brief that we don't want to blame the victim, is double talk. Pure and simple double talk. Mr. Shariif had nothing to do with that encounter. And it wasn't about watching videos. Lots of videos on gun safety. Lots of videos on protecting yourself. Not one video says take out your gun and shoot somebody in the dark when the man is trying to apologize to you for a mistake. That night, Mr. Shariif was on his cell phone. I will never forget the video of his death that we saw in his car. He accidentally almost hit you. He stopped his car and he tried to apologize. Well, I can understand you might have been a little scared. Most people would have moved on, maybe used a few explicatives to tell him how you felt. Very few people in that situation would pull out their gun and empty 11 bullets into a man. And then run home to their girlfriend and not tell anyone. That's cowardice. Pure and simple cowardice. say you have a lot of remorse. I didn't see a lot of remorse on the stand. But maybe that's just me. You made the decision. You made the decision. You used the tool you had at hand, and you ended a life. I do not find there are any mitigating circumstances that would allow me to sentence this adult to anything less than is required by law. Taking only into consideration the fact that you have no other criminal offenses, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to impose 175 months plus 60 months for the gun enhancement. It's 235 months.
That sentence is going to be about 20 years in prison. That will put Alex Waggoner in his late 30s by the time that he is released from custody. One other thing that really stood out to me here is from the victim's family. Abdikadir Gedi Shariif, he was a 31-year-old man, and he was a central part of his family, and he was working to support them. We heard from several family members, including a sibling. We also heard from his cousin, and they all described a picture of a man who was very hardworking, very kind, and willing to help others when they needed it. In this case, the prosecutor said that video clearly shows he was in the act of apologizing for making a minor mistake while making a left-hand turn when he was killed. As you heard the judge say, there was absolutely nothing about Mr. Shariif's actions that justified being murdered like this. It's a really tragic case and also an important reminder. I think what sticks out to me here, the defendant was drunk, he was going to get more alcohol, and he was armed. You're not thinking clearly when you're intoxicated, and clearly that is borne out here, where when he even told investigators he just had to sidestep to step out of the way of the car that was coming toward him. But from there, he perceived that as a threat, pulled out the gun, and killed rideshare driver Abdikadir Shariif. What also sticks out to me about this case is, yes, I think it is a warning to be careful about the content that you're consuming on social media. The defense said that he had become hyper fearful of the world around him, and that he believed that everything was a threat, and he had a gun on him when that happened. So he perceived that he was in immediate danger, shot him, and killed this rideshare driver, and ultimately had a big impact on his life, and as you heard and saw, had a major impact on the family of Abdikadir Shariif. Simply put, this was a case that was completely avoidable if cooler heads had prevailed, and if somebody maybe had not had a gun on them while they'd been drinking, and made a better call to just simply walk away. Or even, as you heard the judge say, you can swear at somebody, you can be upset, but it doesn't rise to the level of pulling out a gun and killing somebody. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on this. There's a lot more reporting on this case on KOMOnews.com, and you can always find me on social media. My tag is @JeremyHarrisTV, or you can email me, JeremyHarris@KOMOnews.com. And again, love to hear your thoughts on this case in the comments. Thanks.